What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Monte Poker. This is vlog episode number 55. If you guys missed last week's episode, you need to go watch it right now. It was absolutely brutal. Brutal. It was bad. Really bad. Go watch it. Not gonna lie, going into this next session, I was in a very tough spot mentally. At this point, I've now figured out what I did wrong and have adjusted, but at the time of this session, everything was still very raw. It had just happened. I was trying to stay positive, but I had just taken the biggest loss I had ever taken, so it was very hard to come in with a positive mindset. Even though I knew what I did wrong, even though I knew what adjustments I needed to make, it's still kind of hard. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced that. You know, you just take a really big loss, you start questioning, like, am I even a good poker player? Do I know what I'm doing? Like, I just suck at this game. Maybe I should quit. Like, we've all had those nights. Don't come over here and tell me you haven't had that night or that one session where you just literally wanted to hang up the poker coat and be done with it. Whether you're recreational or doing this as a, you know, more than recreational hobby, I feel like we've all had those nights when we like really question, like, do I want to keep playing poker? Or you just go on that like consistent run bad for multiple sessions in a row and you're just like, I'm done. I'm fed up. This is annoying, you know? Anyhow, enough of that ranting. For this next session, I really wanted to avoid Brian if he was there at the table. That was my entire outlook walking into the place. I wanted to go back to my more positive EV poker play style, not just get a bunch of money in trying to get piles of money dumped in my lap or in the opponent's lap. But yeah, that's where we're at. Let's see how we do. Starting off this 1-3 game with the $300 cap. We took down the first bomb pot. Nobody called us on the flop, so we only made 80 bucks there. Usually people start matching stacks after the first bomb pot, but since it was so small, everyone's still at around 300. But have no fear, Brian is here, and he's willing to shove with any two cards. He'd actually done this a couple of times before this hand. He's trying to get into flips with people, that way we start playing deeper and everybody on the table adds on, which I can totally understand. A man is helping the game out, which is why I just limped in the $10 with kings, hoping he would shove again, which he absolutely did, and we're obviously going to put in the call. Action folds over to the small blind and he comes along for the ride as well, so we have a big pot brewing. Three-way all in, 755 in the middle. The board runs out 459. The small blind prematurely flips over his hand because he flopped the nuts with the set of nines. The 6 of diamonds and 2 of clubs on the turn and river do not help us whatsoever, and we start off the day by getting our kings cracked. I think under normal circumstances pocket nines would probably fold there, but considering Brian was shoving super wide, I could have easily been calling with just 2 face cards, so the pocket nines could have been good. I just happened to be at the top of my range this time and got totally destroyed. Luckily we had the villain covered, so we're getting a little bit of change back, but it still sucks that we weren't able to take that almost $800 pot down with the best hand. But that's poker. Moving on to the next one. I add on for an additional $200, trying to wait for a hand to get it all in with, to get a quick double up, but it never really comes. So after about another hour or so, I decide to add on for $8,000 because most of the table has added on at this point. And literally the second I have green chips on the table, me and my arch nemesis get into it once again. Brian straddles for $15 on the button. I look down at ace-6 suited under the gun and decide to call the $15, assuming that Brian's gonna do the raising for us. He bumps it up to 40 and we put in the call. $95 in the middle and we go to a wonderful flop of ace-6-7 rainbow. We have most of this board locked up and I don't expect Brian to have caught a piece of this, especially since there aren't very many draws available. So I decide to check my option here and Brian very quickly puts in a check back. The 7 of spades doesn't change much on this board, and at this point an argument can be made for betting, but if we bet and Brian doesn't have anything, he's going to just fold. But with how aggressive he is, if we check it a second time, he might sense some weakness and start blasting off with any 2 cards. So for those reasons, I do put in a check and Brian takes the bait and fires out for $100. We are going nowhere, so I put in the call. $295 in the middle and we go to the river, which comes a queen of clubs. No need for us to do the betting. With how loose and aggressive Brian is, he's just going to do the betting for us a lot of the time, so I check it over to him one more time. Thinks it over for a while and this time he fires out for $500. Put in the call and Brian chose 4-7 off.
This always happens. I run so bad against you.
Man, this really sucks. The one thing I said I wasn't going to do today, which was get involved with Brian, I did almost immediately. We lost 2 hands to him already, and I can feel it affecting my mental. I'm also not proud at the poor table etiquette that I just displayed. I'm usually a lot better about handling my losses. We need to reel it in and get back on track. For this hand, there's a $15 straddle on the button by yours truly. Brian raised to 40. Another player called the 40. I don't like calling with Queen 7 suited, and I also don't like folding for 25 more. We have 15 in there. So we flick in the call this time. Mikey comes along for the ride, and we go to this flop 4 ways of 9-4 queen with 3 hearts. This is a pretty ugly board, but we are in position and everybody checked it over to us, and we have top pair. So I'm going to go ahead and put in a bet here, just trying to take this down now, hoping nobody has a big flush that they're going to chase a draw with, or that anybody's already there. I fire out here for $75. Mikey and Brian get out of the way pretty quickly. Action gets back over to Joe. He puts in the call, and we are going heads up to this turn, which comes a 4 of diamonds. Joe checks one more time, and at this point I start debating what the heck my plan was for the turn and river. I took a stab at this pot on the flop, but didn't really set up a game plan for the turn or river if I got called, which is really dumb considering this hand was being played 4 ways, so it was pretty likely at least one person was going to call my bet on the flop. So I started thinking, how would I play this if I actually flopped a flush? Well, about half pot on the flop seems reasonable into 4 opponents because somebody's likely to call, and then after getting called on the flop by one opponent, I highly doubt they have the bottom paired card unless he's holding pocket 4s, in which case I'm screwed. Not very likely though, so for all intents and purposes, this 4 is a pretty safe card. So I'd either go for about a quarter to half pot size bet if I wanted to go for value, or go for a full pot size bet if I wanted to seem like I was bluffing and trying to steal this. I go with the first option and bet 125. Joe thinks it over for quite a while, but ultimately does end up folding. Great outcome with a hand like Queen 7, a bit of a risky play, but it worked out this time, and we recover some of the losses from that hand with Brian. For this next one, we look down at 5 deuce suited in the cutoff. Not the best hand to be calling a $15 open with, but here we are regardless. And then we just casually flop the nuts and get rewarded for our degeneracy. The action checks over to me, and at the time I was thinking, I have the nuts, there's no real reason for us to bet here, but on a board this connected and suited, probably should have put in at least a small bet to help build up the pot. That's not what we do though. I end up checking, and then Shelby checks this back. The 4 of diamonds comes on the turn, now pairing the board. Karen bets 40, and I very quickly put in a call. Looking back at it now, I wish I would have raised, but luckily Shelby is a mind reader, and he raises for me to 155, and everything deep within my soul is telling me that we're ahead right now and that I should pop him back. But the disciplined poker player inside my head is sitting there telling me, it's a paired board, you no longer have the nuts. Don't do what you did last week and just start blasting off. The other voice inside my head is saying, Shelby doesn't have aces, maybe 3s, but definitely not aces, most likely just a 4. You should raise. But ultimately I didn't, and just put in the call because I told myself we were going to be a little bit more disciplined this week. And then we get an absolutely atrocious card, the 3 of spades. I check as expected, and then Shelby fires for 350. I flip over my hand and start complaining because the only thing I can beat is the ace, which I don't think Shelby has. Absolutely great flop for this hand, but the turn was bad and the river was worse. Had to give it up, unfortunately, but that's poker. Can't win every hand. Moving on to the next one. For the returning viewers, you all know it wouldn't be a proper Outlaws vlog if we didn't get aces. Here we are being blessed by the Rockets once again. Joe opens to $15. I'm going to put in a 3 bet to 50, hoping to get 1, maybe 2 callers at most. And that's exactly what we get. Big blind calls and Joe calls as well. Going 3 ways to this flop with 150 bones in the middle, and the board runs out 8-3-7 rainbow. The action checks over to me. Very safe flop for us to continue betting. I keep it small and go for a $50 bet. Both players put in the call, 300 in the middle, and the ace of spades hits the turn. I don't even know what to say at this point, guys. The amount of times that we get aces per vlog is ridiculous as it is, but then the amount of times we hit sets on top of having aces is just completely unfair. I'm gonna size up a bit here, but we really don't want to scare away any single pair holdings like a pair of 8s or a pair of 7s, so I bet 125 here. Only the big blind puts in the call. 590 in the middle and the 9 of clubs peels off. The action is on me, and at this point I have a decision. I know our opponent doesn't have much more than just a single pair here. If he had 2 pair or better, he would have just dumped money into the middle because I've played with him a fair amount and I know he has a very aggressive play style. But I also know that he doesn't like to fold. So at this point I can either fire between like 125 and 200 to get the guaranteed call, or I can just be super greedy and put all of it in and there's a chance he might call. So I do go all in and our opponent almost snap folds. And looking back at it now, there's really not a lot of bluffs that I would have in this spot. So I think it was a pretty bad jam. Probably should have just bet 150 to 200 and called it a day. Oh well, notes for next time. For this hand, we are in the small blind and there is a $10 button straddle. Various players put in the call, and when the action gets back down to me and I look at pocket tens, do not want to be playing this hand out of position. So I go ahead and bump it up to $65, expecting most people to fold since they're only in for 10. We do lose 2 customers, so we're going to go 3 ways to this flop with 215 in the middle, and the board comes out 887 rainbow. I continue here for $100, about half the size of the pot. Mikey folds, the low jack puts in the call, 415 in the middle, and we go to the turn, which comes a 4 of clubs. I used a pretty good sizing on the flop, so I suspect our opponent might have an 8 here, but he could have also just called our bet on the flop with a 7 as well. I check to see what our opponent does, and he decides to fire here for $100. I find this bet really fishy. He just bet a quarter of the pot. So while I think he has an 8 here a lot of the time, I also noticed he only has 110 behind, and I think it's pretty 50-50 between him having an 8 or a 7 here. Any other player, I'd give them a lot more credit for an 8, but this particular one, it was 50-50 in my head, so I say to heck with it. Let's just play for all of it. I put the 210 in there. He flips over queen 8 offsuit. We're in pretty rough shape. Have to hit a 10 on the river here in order to win this hand. 835 in the middle, and we go to the final card, which comes a jack of clubs. No help for us. Our opponent takes this one down. We were starting to dig ourselves out of the hole that we're in, but unfortunately we just lost some of our profit and we are still stuck a couple hundred on the session. Over the next 2 hours, we pick up a ton of premium: ace king, ace queen, pocket jacks, a couple of small pocket pairs. We opened anywhere between 15 to 30 bucks and just completely whiffed every single flop. Overall, really boring hands, so I didn't include them on the vlog, but they did leave us in this weird situation where we have a little under 200 bucks here, and then we went card dead for a little bit. So when I look down at ace 9 suited on the low jack, I think this is a pretty good hand. I opened to $15, and if anybody raises here, I'm just gonna go all in. Shelby does the honors for us, and then Mikey puts in the call. The rest of the players fold, and as I intended, I just end up shoving here for 194. I'm hoping to just take this down and scoop the dead money in the middle without having to actually go to a run out. Shelby puts in the 4-bet to 475, which is absolutely awful for us because we are most likely dominated. Mikey folds and Shelby flips over ace king offsuit. Well, at least we have some outs. Going to this board run out with 438 in the middle, and we bink the 3 outer, immediately hitting the 9 of diamonds on the flop. What an absolute luck box. We've now turned the tables on Shelby, and he either needs to hit a king or go running diamonds to take this hand down. The turn brings us a 3 of hearts, which is an absolutely awful card for him. Now the king of hearts is no longer good, as it would give us the nut flush. 2 kings remaining in the deck, and the river brings us the 7 of hearts, giving us the flush. Rough run out for ace king, but luckily we were short and Shelby didn't lose too much in that hand. Instead of sitting there and just shoving with a short stack, I decided to not be a complete degenerate and add $1,500 to my stack and play normal poker instead. We already got lucky once and I don't want to push it. We take this new tower of chips and we go right back to war. For this next hand, we are in the big blind with pocket kings. There was an open to $15 under the gun. Mikey put in the call. Action's on me and I bump it up to $50. Shelby puts in the call. Mikey comes along for the ride as well. $150 in the middle, and we go to this board run out 3 ways, and the flop brings us 3 ace 10 with 2 diamonds. Great. I check and the action surprisingly checks around, so I'm thinking maybe we might have the best hand now. This 4 of clubs doesn't really change too much. Deuce 5 just got there, but I'm not putting anybody on that, considering that was a $50 raise pre-flop. I check for deception here and Shelby takes the bait, decides to fire out for 50. Mikey gets out of the way. I put in the call. 250 in the middle, and we go to this river, which brings us the 8 of hearts. And now the question is, should we check one more time or should we bet this river? The 2 hands I was putting Shelby on were either the flush draw or potentially just a pair of 10s. If he had an ace, I don't think he would have played it this way. If we come out and lead on this river after we just check the flop and the turn, I don't think he's calling with his flush draws and he might be able to fold a 10. So I decide to check instead, and to my surprise, he comes out and fires 275. This is a very polarizing bet. Shelby's telling us that he either has an absolute monster or completely whiffed his diamond draw. And I'm trying to think what hands he could have here. Ace king maybe, but we're double blocking that. Ace queen, I don't know. I really don't think he would have played the ace this way. Now with this river bet, I'm starting to discredit that he just has a pair of 10s as well. I couldn't put him on a hand here, so I got curious and flicked in the call, and that's when Shelby flipped over pocket 10s, which makes a lot of sense. His check on the flop really threw me off, and I completely discredited sets for some reason. I think he played this really well and definitely got the maximum out of me. The tilt juice is starting to kick in. We got absolutely wrecked by pocket kings twice last session. We've now lost with them twice this session, and it's getting really old really fast. But that's quite alright because it's time for the PLO flip. If you guys watched last week's episode, you know Brian loves these. I'm not sure if he's getting up soon or he's just getting really bored, but he offered to do a flip. I decided on $200 and we let anybody on the table join in on it. For those of you that are newer to the channel, we're basically just being degenerates, throwing a predetermined amount of money into the pot, getting dealt 4 cards, running the entire board out, and then we flip over 1 card at a time to see who has the best possible hand. I'll go ahead and run the clip now.
Terrible river. You gotta be.
All right, gotta be 10. 6. 10? Yeah,
6 kicker, yeah.
Good one.
8. Shit.
6 across.
9. Pair of 9s. Pair of 9s.
Winning. Oh, that's a good ace. Beat a pair of 9s.
Don't you dare. Don't you dare. Don't you dare. Don't you dare. Oh, thank God.
So at the beat a pair of 9s?
Yeah. Oh my God. 4-6 for street.
Straight. Oh,
You bastard.
come on. Brick out, Shelby. Brick out.
I could have quad jack.
No club. No club. No club. No club. Don't do it. Don't do it. Oh, you bastard. You bastard.
Nope, it's.
So say, yo. Straight. Hell yeah. I'll take it. Deuce.
Nothing to really analyze there, just absolute degeneracy. Also, apologies for the graphic being off. We made 600, not 400. And now the stack is sitting pretty. We're in for about 2,500 on the session, so we're about $30 short of being dead even, and the night is looking much better. For this next hand, we look at a wonderful hand, Jack 10 suited, and I decide to bump it up to $20. We end up getting called by not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 different players. $100 in the middle, and we go to this flop, which comes out pretty good for our hand. 4 ace 4 with 2 clubs. The action checks over to me, and I bet about 2/3 of the pot here for $65. The cutoff decides to come along, the button folds, and then the small blind decides to go all in for $177. This particular villain has already beat us in a couple hands tonight, and while the pots weren't absolutely massive, they were definitely bigger than $177. What you guys haven't seen off the camera is him overcalling with a bunch of very marginal hands and just giving all of his profits right back to the table, and then him rebuying for an additional $200, which has happened about 6 or 7 times tonight. So that being said, he could be doing this with any ace or any 4. So I decide to flick in the call, assuming that if we hit our flush draw, it's going to be good. The cutoff gets out of the way. 519 in the middle, and we go to the turn, which comes a deuce of diamonds, and then we bink our flush on the river with the king of clubs, and our opponent flips over 4 deuce offsuit for a turned full house. Yikes, man. Seat 7 seems to have our number tonight, and there's not a lot we can do about it. About half an hour goes by before we look down at Queen 9 offsuit on the big blind. There was an open to $20 with 2 callers in between. We're closing the action, and I decide to get a little bit out of line here, calling with this hand, and we're instantly rewarded for our undisciplined poker play by flopping trips with a pretty good kicker. I check this, hoping that one of our opponents takes a stab at it. The low jack bets 25, the hijack calls the 25, I call the 25, and the middle position player gets out of the way. 155 in the middle, and the 6 of hearts comes on the turn. I check it once again, hoping that the low jack will continue betting. He fires out one more time for 100, and we just put in the call. 355 in the middle, and the 8 of diamond peels off. At this point, I don't want to check the river and risk it just being checked back. The particular opponent that we're in the hand with at the moment has gotten out of line quite a few times tonight. I could have seen him taking this line with just a deuce or some sort of pocket pair, pocket 4s, pocket 5s, maybe even pocket 10s. I was a bit afraid of ace 9 suited, but there's only one combination of that available considering 3 of the 9s are accounted for. And since I felt like I was ahead of most of his range, I thought going for a big value bet on the river would be good. So I fire out here for $400. Our opponent thinks it over for quite a bit of time, which is music to my ears because if he had ace 9, he would have called this already. And if he had a boat, he definitely would have called this already. So I am now certain that we have the best hand here, but I'm not sure what our opponent has here because he does not want to fold. After going back and forth between folding and calling for a minute or two, ultimately lands on throwing in some green chips. It was a bit confusing at first because I couldn't tell if it was a call or a raise. We flip over our queen 9 off. He flips over jack 9 off, and we scoop a pretty solid profit. With this, our stack is trending in a good direction, feeling a lot better about the night. But at this point in the night, the second table has broken because it is getting pretty late. We're down to just a main table and we're losing players. So we are graced by the one and only Kev Dog.
Hashtag who has 4 kids?
Hell yeah, there it is.
In this economy, only you, Kev. Only you. Anyhow, for this next one, we look down at ace 10 suited in the small blind. Happy to see some pretty cards after looking at garbage for a few hours. There's an open to $15 and 4 callers. So when the action gets back to me, I think a squeeze is in order. I 3-bet to 75, and then the middle position player almost instantly re-raises to 200. And then the wild card that's been owning our soul all night goes all in for 296. And to be honest, I'm not really buying it. The wild card could have any 2 cards here because once he puts money in the pot, it's very hard for him to fold, and he'll go all in with almost anything pre-flop. Now the middle position player has also gotten out of line today, but it's also very possible that he's playing a mid-range pocket pair like 8s, 9s, 10s, or jacks in this manner. So there is a little bit of credibility here. But if he had a good pair like queens or better, I definitely think he would have opened for a lot more pre-flop considering his position. So I put in the call here with the intentions on firing on any queen high, king high, or ace high board. Middle position obviously puts in the call because he's not going to fold for 96 more. So we're going 3 ways to this flop. 9-18 in the middle, and the board runs out king 8-8. As I mentioned before, we were planning on firing on any queen, king, or ace high board. So I amass some chips, bet 250, and the middle position player announces fold almost instantly. So we take our chips back. At this point, we just have to hold against the wild card. 3 of diamonds on the turn, king of diamonds on the river. We flip over our ace high. Our opponent flips over queen high, and we take down an almost $1,000 pot with literally just ace high. Completely wild and unconventional hand. We trusted our gut on this one, and it paid off. For this next hand, we looked down at ace queen offsuit in the cutoff. The low jack raises to 15. I decide to re-raise to 30, trying to thin the field a little bit. This works out perfectly as only the low jack calls. So we go heads up with $60 in the middle to this flop, which comes deuce 4 10 with 2 diamonds. Our opponent fires here for $45. With 2 overs and a backdoor flush draw, I decide to get sticky here and float 1 street. The 5 of clubs changes nothing on the turn. Our opponent continues for 125, and I find this bet sizing a bit peculiar. I can't remember if I've played with this particular opponent. I've definitely seen him around, but I don't know if I've had him at my table yet, and if I have, it's been months since we've played together. Anyhow, I'm not buying it, so I get sticky here and put in the call, and we go off to the river with $400 in the middle, which brings us the deuce of clubs. Our opponent fires for 500, and I go into the tank for quite a bit. I end up showing the table that I'm just tanking with ace high here, and I even go as far as telling our opponent that I don't know why I'm taking so long and why I'm debating calling here with just ace high. I show our opponent the ace, and he just stone cold, absolutely no reaction whatsoever. If you can tell, he's almost completely frozen in the frame here. But at the end of the day, regardless of what my gut was telling me, I just don't think it's going to be profitable long term to be calling in this spot here. I decided to let it go, and our opponent shows us Queen Jack offsuit. Yikes, man. Sucks to see that we were right, but our opponent put us in a really tough spot. I was not able to find the hero call with ace high for $500. About 30 minutes go by and we get involved in another hand with the same villain. There's a limp to 3. He raises to 20. I put in the call for 20 and the cutoff. Kevin takes a peek at his hand but quickly gets out of the way. The other 2 remaining players get out of the way. Under the gun, puts in the call, and we're off 3 ways to this flop. 60 in the middle, not 40. Graphics are off by a little bit, and we get a 6-10-4 rainbow board. The action checks over to me, and at this point I think I probably just could have put in a bet trying to take the pot down. Our pair may have been best, but I decided to check instead. The action checks over to the low jack, puts in a bet of $35, and now I decide to bump it up to $80. Now the low jack decides to re-bump it up to $260, and at this point it's clear that he has a very big hand. We're just bluffing here with pocket deuces, praying that a 3 hits the board, which might not even be good depending on what our opponent has, so it's just time to give up and fold. So naturally we put in the call. Can't really justify or explain this one. Getting really late in the night and I'm steaming from getting bluffed earlier. 560 in the middle, and we go to this river, which comes a king of clubs. Our opponent fires for $300. Seems pretty value heavy. At this point it's clear that he has a pretty good hand. I don't think he's ever bluffing in this spot. We already made one stupid call on the turn, so it's time to give up here. There's no way our deuces are good, and given the strength that our opponent is communicating here, I don't think he's gonna fold to a raise. So any disciplined player would just throw their cards in the muck here, so naturally we raise. I bump it up to $750. It's $150 more than a min raise. Looking back at it now, I wish I would have just folded this hand much sooner, but to explain what I was thinking at the time, I thought this bet looked a lot more credible, like I had an absolute monster and I was just going for really thick value, as opposed to going for an $800 or $900 bet here. It might look a lot more bluffy, but looking at it now and at the size of the pot, I don't think our opponent can ever fold for $350 more here if he has a big hand like 2 pair or better like he is representing. Our opponent makes the call, as he should. I let him know that he's good. He flips over a 5-4 offsuit, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is what happens when you let tilt and fatigue take over. You start dusting chips like a house cleaner. I accidentally missed this one when sending my editor the footage, so there's no graphics for it. Anyhow, we picked up pocket queens in this hand. I raised to $15. We got re-raised to $35. I 3-betted to $75, and we got 2 callers. So we're going 3 ways to this flop with 210 in the middle. The board came out 6 high, and our opponent to our right went all in. Obviously, we're not going to fold queens here. I snap call. The other opponent is already all in. The ace of spades hits the turn, and then the jack of diamonds hits the river. And both of our opponents have ace jack in this spot, so they are chopping up our money. We had made a comeback earlier in the session, and now we are on full tilt due to our punting and a little bit of run bad mixed in. So I tell myself that we need to get up real soon, because if not, we're going to leave the rest of this on the table. But I haven't quite convinced myself that we're done yet. In my bad state of mind, I was determined to get unstuck, or at least decrease the deficit by a reasonable margin to try and make up for the stupid decisions I made tonight. In general, I think it's better to just cut our losses and come back another time when we aren't being emotional about the poker, but I'm just keeping it real for you guys. There was definitely some ego at work here. We had our biggest loss to date on the previous session, and I didn't want to go home a 2-time loser, especially not after we set such a crazy goal for the month of trying to hit $5,000. Anyhow, for this next hand, I went for a very big squeeze play, trying to isolate, assuming I had the best hand pre-flop. The rest of the hand just kind of played itself, so I'll roll the clip here.
3. Just because Kev. 3 call.
I'll look at 1. I'm gonna have to look at 2.
Oh. Had to look at 2.
Holy shit.
16.
What's the rest of it too bad because I'm not folding for what you have left. just relax here. Let's just,
Just relaxing.
just don't hit top pair.
Oh my god. Phenomenal flop for me. I'm calling it.
Really?
Yeah, I'm open-ended. Give me a 7. Oh baby.
Really? Damn, dude.
Give me a 7.
We had the better hand pre-flop, our opponents sucked out on us, and both of them hit a jack on the flop. Ironic that it was the same hand that cracked our queens earlier, but we made back our losses from that hand and a little extra on top. At this point, I decided to knit up a little bit and gave myself a 30-minute time limit before we were going to head out for the night, and that's when we looked down at a terrible omen, Pocket Kings, the hand that's been destroying me for the last 2 sessions. But we can't let that stop us. There's a $25 open, one player calls. I decided to just go for a little min click here and bump it up to $50. I had asked the player to my right, Mr. Seabass, how big of a raise he would call right before doing this, and he said he wouldn't call a raise. So we min clicked it and then told him that he couldn't possibly fold to a min click. It was only $25 more. Various players got out of the way, and to my surprise, a player across the table decided to raise this to $200. This let Seabass off the hook, and when the action got back over to me, I was not going to slow play kings this time. I decided to re-raise up to $400. Our opponent went into the tank for quite a while, but I gave him the same spiel about him not being able to fold to a min raise. Our opponent agrees, throws the chips in the middle. We go heads up to this flop with 835 in the pot, which comes 10, 6, 8 rainbow. Our opponent checks it over to us, and I fire here for 475. He tanks for a while, flashes a 4 of spades for some reason, not sure what that's paired with, but then throws his hand into the muck, and we end up taking down this pot. After that, as I promised myself, I did start racking up my chips. There was a PLO bomb pot that we played at 2 a.m. and then before we actually closed out for the night, we did end up doing one of our PLO flips, but it was only 3 of us doing it, so I didn't end up recording that one since the camera was already unmounted and ready for our departure. But considering we were down to about $800 at some point in this session, I think we made a pretty decent comeback and helped mitigate our losses. Kind of stupid that we were up to almost even and we kept pushing our luck, especially when our mental wasn't in a great place for this session. But we'll go into that a bit deeper after I show you guys the session stats. All right, ladies and gentlemen, well, I have a lot to say, but before we get into any of it, let's go over the session stats first so you guys can see how bad the damage was. Not that it's what we want to share. I always want to come in with good news, but unfortunately we lost the session. All right, let's get into it. So for this session, we were in for a total of 3,500, which you can see here, and we cashed out a total of 2,200. Obviously, we left some tips. Sorry, I looked at the wrong camera. For a total loss, it says profit, but it was obviously a loss of $1,300, which is negative 459 big blinds an hour, or in dollar amounts, it's negative 141 to our hourly rate. Rather unfortunate. And going over the graph year to date, this is from the beginning of January to this session, our total profit overall is 1980. That's over the course of 10 sessions, 63 hours of playtime, averaging around 1,700 hands, for an average profit of $31 an hour. And if you break down our overall profit over the sessions, it's about $116 in profit per session. Overall profitability ratio is at 70%, but it's only 10 sessions, so that's 7 out of 10. So it's not really a big sample size that we can really do anything with those numbers. But yeah, this is our graph up to date. You know, absolutely destroyed that 5K mark that we wanted in January, and then just and here we are. All right, well, let's switch over to the big screen. So, what happened? I didn't want to mention anything during the poker. I wanted to give you guys my raw thoughts as far as what was going on with poker. But coming into this session, I do not feel like I was set up for success. Work had been an absolute nightmare for 2 weeks consistently. I was working through lunches at least 3 times a week. I was getting there early, leaving late. I was doing things after hours for people. They needed after hours support. So work was stressing me out beyond belief. It was also my birthday coming up this weekend, right after the session. Everybody was asking me what I wanted to do, what was going on, what the game plan was. I had zero clue as to what the heck I wanted to do. I didn't want to make any plans or any obligations. I wanted to just leave my weekend open. so I could honestly just catch up on sleep because I was so sleep deprived from the week. I slept like 4 hours Tuesday into Wednesday, 2 hours Wednesday into Thursday, which is the worst day to not get sleep, because playing poker on no sleep or doing anything on no sleep, your mental function and, you know, you're just not really there. You know, you're more tired. You got to pay a lot of attention in poker, believe it or not. So going into that sleep deprived, not ideal. Also, you have to stay very disciplined and not let the things that happen on the table affect you as a player or affect your decision making. Much harder to do on no sleep. On top of that, I have people messaging me from work while I'm playing, trying to help them out because things are going wrong, but I'm also in the middle of another obligation. I also have personal things going on outside of that. People reaching out, trying to talk, wanting to plan things, me wanting to honor obligations and commitments to the people in my life that are important to me, and, you know, celebrate my birthday that's coming up. But all of it is stressing me the hell out. And we still have the run bad from the previous week that's still sitting and lingering in the back of my mind. So it was just a hodgepodge of just bad. Regardless of all that, I need to learn to manage my time better and make sure that we're actually staying on top of it as far as sleeping properly. The life stuff, kind of unavoidable. The work stuff, also unavoidable. But the least I can do is take care of myself, manage my time better, make sure I am giving myself enough time on the weekend to edit these videos. That way I don't have to stay up until 1 or 2 in the morning the night before or posting one. Anyhow, as far as the reasoning in any of the hands, I gave you guys the explanation during the hand. Whether it was correct or not correct, not really making an argument for either or there. I leave that to your own interpretation. All I can tell you is what I was thinking at the time, the state of mind I was in. It's not always the right decision. Sometimes it is so blatantly stupid to me when I'm watching these videos and looking over the footage. But regardless of what I'm thinking now, I have to tell you guys what I was thinking at the time that led me to make those decisions. And like I've always said, we try to stay transparent here. I'm not just gonna post the big wins. So not a great session that I'm proud of sharing this time around. To be honest, the next 2 or 3 vlogs might be kind of similar in the sense that my head wasn't quite screwed on right. And to be honest, I feel like this is part of every person's journey. We're not just always going to play well 24/7. You're going to have your ups and downs as a player. I've recently set some big goals and I'm trying to increase the stakes that I'm playing at. So naturally, with the larger pots, it's going to affect the decision making a bit more and lead to some questionable decisions as we improve and change our game. Anyhow, that's enough rambling. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. As per usual, appreciate all the love and support that I've been seeing from you guys, not just in watching the videos, but also some of you have been jumping to my defense in the comment section, and it's been absolutely hysterical. Whether I agree or disagree with anything that you guys are saying, I always like getting feedback. And then as far as changes that I need to make to the vlog, I generally go for the thing that I am already leaning towards that the most people agree with. So please keep dropping comments, even if you guys are lone wolves. I do read every single one and take things into consideration when it comes to changes and improvements that we can make on the vlog. All right, that's it for me, guys. Catch you next week. Good luck on the felt. Take it easy. Peace.